Hello, I'm Jenny Paulson from the Rollins Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at Brigham Young University. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Lecture Series. Today we'll be hearing from Dave Perry, founder and CEO of Cascade Toy Limited, located in North Bend, Washington. His company makes fine puppets, wildlife plush, and teddy bear collectibles. More than 15,000 gift shops, toy stores, zoos, museums, national parks, and nature stores in the U.S., Canada, and Europe carry his toys. Dave graduated from BYU in 1978 with a degree in psychology. In 2007, he completed a master's degree in counseling psychology. He currently works part-time for LDS Family Services and has a private counseling practice. He married his college sweetheart, Joanne, more than 30 years ago. They now have 5 children and 7 grandchildren. Please welcome Dave Perry to the Entrepreneur Lecture Series.
Well, thank you, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be here with you. 30 years ago, I graduated from BYU. I'm proof that there is life after graduation. How many non-business majors do we have here? We've got a few. Okay. Well, here I am with a psych degree. Launched right into business. The way we're going to do things today is I'm going to give you a little bit of a background. I'm always a little uncomfortable talking about myself per se, but that kind of goes to why we're here, to give you the path of my business career and the startups of businesses and so on. So we'll go into that towards the end. We'll leave a significant amount of time for questions and answers. So if you've got a good question that comes up during the presentation, hang on to it. At the end, we'll give you plenty of time to ask the questions, and I incentivize the whole thing. If it's a good question, you get a toy as well. So there you go. And some of you guys, you know, maybe these aren't your, maybe you got kids at home, or maybe you got a girlfriend that could really use a cool toy. So there you go. Well, let's get started. I've got a little PowerPoint to you. It's pretty rudimentary. I needed to have my son, who's going into the MTC Wednesday, create it for me. I'm not too savvy with PowerPoint. But as I mentioned, I graduated from BYU. I had been working for a management consulting firm during my time at the Y, doing management training sorts of things. And I took every class that I could take in organizational behavior. But back in 1978, there wasn't a major offered in OB. It was strictly a master's program. And so I took all the organizational behavior I could and stuck with my psych degree. And then after I left college, I had one child, and my wife was pregnant with our second, and we headed up to Seattle. And when we got there, the realities of life and money and $135 in rent that we used to pay at Provo, can you believe that? Didn't work anymore. And I didn't have enough money in my pocket to make things work on a commission basis, because that's what I was working on, a total commission basis. And I'd signed some contracts and such, but I needed to go out and get a real job that paid a salary. So I began interviewing with headhunters, management recruiters. And it led to an interview with a toy company, who back in those days, it was Kenner Toys, which is just a brand now of Hasbro. At the time, Kenner was a General Mills subsidiary who owned Parker Brothers, Kenner, and another company that nobody remembers. But we were known for our Star Wars toys. Star Wars was hot, and it was the top toys in the toy business. And that's where I went to work, junior salesman. Quickly was promoted through just a great opportunity very quickly. And then I took a job that paid a little bit more with a company called Lakeside Games. You don't remember that either. They don't exist either. But the games continue on. Aggravation, Perfection, Barrel of Monkeys, games like that hopefully all of you have played. And I sold a lot of that stuff. So that's kind of the career path, leaving school. All of it happened pretty quickly. Lakeside Games went into a Chapter 11, largely because Atari came out. Does that really date me or what? Atari came out, the board game business really took a nosedive because people wanted to play electronic games. And they allowed us to take the company and still represent them while they were in 11 as commissioned sales reps rather than salaried employees, which I seized upon. And then there's a whole nother business out there, manufacturers representatives, which are people that work on total commissions representing small and medium-sized toy companies that don't or can't afford to pay a salary and benefits. And that's what I did with a partner. My partner and I had some value differences. We separated after about 3 years. He bought me out. I started another group, and then I began traveling the Orient about 1987, mostly Hong Kong at the time, and then that evolved to South Korea and Indonesia, China, and so on. I fell in love with importing. I found that it was the first thing I was doing in the morning, the last thing at night. It became a real passion for me. The excitement of creating products, importing them, and then seeing how they do. And I could set my own price. It was, wow, I kind of liked it. So in 1991, I took the jump, sold my rep firm a second time, and started Cascade Toy. And of course, I went out and got an SBA loan. And I'll get into the finances later, but that was a whole other experience. But I sold the company in 2005 to a company called Playvisions in Seattle, Washington. Playvisions makes unusual toys, some of which some of you have seen. Some of you have seen these things you stretch over your head, right? They're crazy, wacky. I've got one or two I can give you when we're done. I'm not going to do it because my hair has to look nice. But they'd make a lot of fun, stretchy type toys, wacky stuff, kind of gross stuff, you know, inflatable tongues and weird things. But it's a fun company. I've known the owners for 20 plus years, and it was a nice, easy transition. The most difficult part of our negotiations on the purchase of my company was how I would fly to China. You know, would it be economy or business class? And to me, that was a non-negotiable. and we finally solved that problem. And I originally was hired on as a consultant, but as a lot of the acquisition type of deals happen, that they didn't know how to make soft toys, and so it went from being a consultant to full-time, and which I'm enjoying. It's a great company, and I enjoy working with them. Looking ahead to retirement, I thought that I might as well, I had a desire to get my master's degree in psychology. And I thought it would be a great way to still give back even in retirement. And so I, through night and evening classes and Saturdays, worked for about 3 years to get my master's degree in counseling psychology. And interned with LDS Family Services and continue to work with them on a real limited basis part-time. And then do some counseling privately as well. So all I can say is that getting a master's degree at my age was a lot harder. So my advice, get it a little sooner, you know. So that's a little bit of a career profile for you. The Cascade Toy model, we'll fly through it pretty quickly since I have sold the company, but I kept it in there largely because I thought it might be instructive for you to see how originally it was set up. We only had 10 full-time employees at any one time. I outsourced as much as I possibly could. Everything from accounting, you know, to the warehousing, the shipping personnel. We use public warehouses to keep our costs at a static level. I would know what our percentage of cost would be because it was flat. It didn't fluctuate at all. And it was the way we opted to go. We used 150 sales reps around the United States. They were total commission. Again, they didn't sell. I didn't have to pay them anything. Okay, so it kept my costs at a minimum. The customer profiles Jenny explained at the beginning, those are the kind of stores: gift shops, toy stores, educational shops, zoos, museums, and nature stores, which have kind of are now extinct as well. You know, the nature companies and natural wonders have gone the way of business evolution. But U.S., Canada, Europe, and now we're doing a lot of business in Russia and the Ukraine as well. Originally, the manufacturing began in South Korea. South Korea was known for its soft toys, the stuffed animals, did an excellent job, great design work, and that's where I went. As that economy grew and making soft toys was just not a good thing for them anymore, and they moved to higher tech products and became too expensive for us to stay there. So we went to Indonesia with our manufacturing, and then Indonesia became a little destabilized there for a while, and we moved to China, and we've been in China for quite a while since then. So that's, and it's just not Shanghai anymore, right? We use factories all over the country, and I go there quite often in visiting the factories and working with them. The distribution was always done out of warehouse in Seattle, public warehouse, and as I mentioned before, SBA loan, interesting experience going through that. It was about like running naked outside. Maybe that'll get edited, I don't know, but it was a little scary. You know, it was a very interesting experience going through the SBA. I wasn't really prepared for it, but it was, yeah, they want to know so much about so many things. I wasn't, being a relatively private person, I wasn't used to that. We were immediately underfunded. I mortgaged, I second and third mortgaged it was a big, I took the risk. You know, I leveraged everything, and I felt it was a educated gamble, if you will, because I knew the business, I knew what I was getting into, and I felt that I understood the market. So the time was right for me to take that kind of risk. And so I really leveraged everything, and even that, I didn't have enough. As we started doing business across the United States, maintaining an inventory is costly. You've got money just sitting there. So I was faced with just one alternative, and that was to go to the factories that I worked with and told them very candidly, if you want me to stay in business, you're going to have to help finance me and give me credit on your production. And to their credit and my good fortune, they did so. And that enabled us to get over the hump of business and starting to make money. And all of our financing after the SBA loan experience, we paid off that bank in 2 years, and then I moved all of our financing to Hong Kong, and we used well, probably shouldn't name brands, but we used foreign banks for our credit lines, and it worked quite well since the flow of money outside of through Hong Kong was very convenient for our Chinese vendors and other parts of the world as well. So it worked very, very well for us. The marketing side will kind of buzz through mostly trade shows, and there's a variety of them. That's a really interesting business, the trade show business, but there's gift shows all around the country, toys, souvenir shows, trade magazines, the commission sales reps, and then of course we used websites and marketing the product. Now, let me just talk lately. Since I've sold the company, one of the benefits to me of having sold the company is I don't have to sweat the details as much anymore. I don't have to worry about who's making payroll, you know, and I don't have to worry about hiring and firing and personnel problems. I can just have fun creating toys, which is what I've always liked to do. So Zibbies is a product line that we developed after I sold the company to Playvisions, and Zibbies are these little guys here. We were one day just sitting around trying to fit, and we stretched over a much smaller version of this over a stuffed animal. I thought, whoa, that's kind of weird, kind of cool. And so we stretched them on, and then it took about 6 months to figure out how to actually do it. But these are called Zibbies here. So they've got the weird stretchy hair, and we do it in a number of different styles. We developed a website, since that's kind of the thing to do, interactive websites for kids where they can go and play games and so on. And Stretch Zoo are products where we took that same material again and gave them stretchy arms. You know, and then you can fling them. They're a lot of fun. I won't do it in here. There's a lot of things that could break, but fun little things like this where we do stretchy appendages. It's just fun. It's fun stuff. There's this one gal in the office, I've just got to say, she walks by my office and sees me in there with toys, and she always laughs, you know. A big old guy like me, you know, played college football and all that kind of stuff, sitting there playing with all these small toys, but I enjoy it. So the creation process, the beginnings, you know, we use freelance artists, designers around the United States mostly that send me artwork. I ask them for specific things. They create it. I take it and we tweak it. together and get it to what I need. Then it's sent off to the designers at the factories, who then create the prototypes. And then we go back and forth over a period of time, usually me going to the factory and working with them hands-on to actually finally to create the final approved product. I just showed you some of the drawings that exist. Some of them are a little rougher than others. Some of the artists are a little bit more talented, obviously, in creating the product and give you a better look. Some of them get a little close to other designs, like on this one here, you'll see that was a little close to Tony the Tiger. You know, I didn't know where the artist got his inspiration. I said, why don't you take a good look at Tony and make sure we're not anywhere close to it, and because I really don't want to invite that problem. But that's really the beginning of the toys. It's the designers in China, in Korea, are absolutely amazing. To take a flat drawing like that turtle on the left, and turn it into that three-dimensional toy and have it be so close, it's a real art, in my opinion, and they do an incredible job. And so that's really it's not any more difficult than that. It's just getting in your head what it is you want to make and fill a market niche and go out there and make it happen. As it turned out, that's been a very successful little toy for us and does well. Now this is a little gratuitous, and I can't help it. The benefits of doing this is that I can use my own children and grandchildren, so that's one of my granddaughters, and she's in the catalog this year, and I'm sure she's contributed a great deal to the sale of that particular toy. But she is cute. I couldn't help myself. I thought you might be interested in kind of seeing the inside of a typical factory in China. And there's a lot of similarity between the factories, so I think this one factory, which happens to be in Suzhou, is very instructive. Now, this particular factory is owned by a Korean company, and they are one of the largest factories for Disney and many other Build-A-Bear and people like that. So they're an independent factory. We certainly don't own them, and we just contract with them to make our designs. Okay, and that's how that works. So as far as the inside of the factory goes, of course, nowadays, though, the number of bikes would be much less. There's a lot more cars being driven in China these days, which is adding to their pollution problem. But this particular factory is a larger one. They've got about 1,200 sewing machines in operation at any time. And the rooms are typically like this. Some of the factories that we choose not to use, there's a wide disparity. Some of them, in the wintertime, for example, may not be as well lit or as well heated. Better factories that we try to use are cleaner, well lit, employees generally paid more, and it's a better environment for them. For us, it's important to use top-notch factories. So that's a typical factory. What's going on below there is the stuffing machine. All the skins for the animals are sewn inside out. They're reversed, and there's a hole left in it, and there's a little nozzle. And some of you have done this probably at Build-A-Bear. You know, you stick a little nozzle into the animal, and then you hit a little foot pedal, and it blows polyfibers on the inside. Later on in the process, those are closed. This factory is making, it looks like some Tigger and some Winnie the Pooh there. But on the Tigger, the stripes in that particular factory are all hand sprayed, as opposed to buying fabric that's already printed. And so it's just interesting for you. A lot of detail, a lot of touching by human hands that you don't see in other sorts of production process. So whenever you see a stuffed animal, it's been touched a lot by a lot of people. Very labor intensive. At this particular factory, excuse me, and it's very common in China, in other regions as well, the workers are offered living quarters in the complex. So that is where those workers live. And they have apartments there. The room down below is a cafeteria, very clean. So they live there, get 3 square a day. In this particular factory, they're offered daycare and medical care as well. And one of the first things I ask when we're talking to a new factory is how many of your workers return after the Lunar New Year? You know, because a lot of these workers go home because they're provided so much of the housing and food with a fair amount of money, and going back to their provinces, sometimes remote, they're coming back with more money than their parents and a lot of the people that in their community have ever had at one time. And if to come back to a factory that hasn't treated them well, hasn't paid them fairly, it doesn't happen. They'll upgrade to a different factory and so on. So if I can find a factory that has a high rate of return of workers, to me that's an indicator that it's a good operation. And we try to use factories like that. So that's kind of a bit of the inside of the operation. And so now for some lessons learned. One of the things I learned when I first decided to start my own company, at least the Cascade Toy side, there was a lot of people that were naysayers around me, that including my accountant that I love dearly, but he was a bean counter and he was not an entrepreneur and didn't have the bug, and I wanted to do something. And so sometimes you have to dare to dream despite the realists around you. You need to listen to their advice and take it, but at the same time dare to dream. And don't be afraid of mistakes. And I've certainly made my share of mistakes, and I brought some of them with me. For example, recently we thought it would be a great idea to do, since we're kind of innovating, to do a little fan. I see, that one doesn't even work. That's how big of a mistake it is. We thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to do a fan inside of an animal, Yeah, see, you're smiling. You're thinking, oh, yeah. And buyers did the same thing, The big buyers all over the United States thought, oh, well, that's a cool idea. Well, making a prototype and making something in mass production sometimes is very different. And the mass production on this thing just did not work. And we had to scrap the whole production run. The execution wasn't good. And it wasn't so much the factory that produced it as it was the design wasn't good. So we were able to inspect them in our warehouse and find the good ones and sell them. We didn't lose any money, but it was a real woofer, or a dog as we call it. I had a guy that thought that making this kind of a zibby would be a good idea, and I told him no, that's just not going to work. He went out there and made these against my desires, and they just totally bombed. These kinds of things tend to be a little bit more productive and successful. This is a toy that we designed, and this happens a lot. You design it, and then market conditions change, and you decide, no, we're not going to make this. We're not going to introduce it. And this little guy is one of those. Of course, hopefully this will air. The factory doesn't know we're not making it yet, so this doesn't air until after they'll know from me. But it's kind of cute.
Let's go.
I think it's kind of cool, don't you, with the hair wiggling and everything? The problem is I kept asking the question. They send me music, and I said, okay, now do you have the copyrights for that? And, well, no. I said, well, copyrights are important to us. We need to have copyrights in any music you're using, and you need to secure that. Well, that was a real obstacle. And then the pricing, that's cute and everything, but the price was too high. Like, you wouldn't pay $25 for that, would you? No way, And by the time we did all the markups we have to get, it would have been $20 to $25 retail. Some of our retailers nowadays, they're in a tough spot. The rents are high, and some of them have to charge bigger than normal markups to survive. And so we have to consider that when we're creating product. What will it retail for? And at that retail, will it have a good chance of success? So that item, cute. I'm sorry for the factory outside of Nanjing that made those samples for me, but we're not going to be able to do it. So there you go. First. And frankly, I've sold some products that are real woofers in the past. When I was with Kenner Toys, we made a product called Milky, the Marvelous Milking Cow. It was a cow. Yeah, chuckles from the audience. You had a little bowl of water, right? The head would drop down in it. You'd pump the tail. It would suck the water up, and then in the udders, there were these white tablets that would color the water. Then it would come out. Yeah, made by a big company. I had a blast selling it, but it was a real woofer. And of course, we had a lot of other toys that just were dogs. But But that's it. 80% of the new toys introduced in January, February of 2009 will fail. That's just the statistic. That's what happens. So another lesson learned, I digressed, coming back. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and get into a market, my advice would be to become a good student of the market. Understand it. Take the time to homework it. You may think you have a great idea, and it may be, but it could be that there's already other product in the market similar. And if somebody else has failed, that doesn't necessarily mean that yours wouldn't succeed, but you need to understand why they fail and what you could do different that would help you be successful. Don't forget, don't get too full of yourself. Be humble. I'm trying to avoid specific company names too much on this, but there's a lot of toy companies that have had real winners, that you remember the product, but now the companies are just, nobody knows because they got too full of themselves. They wanted to be the big players and let their egos drive it, and now they're gone. They don't exist anymore. So it's important to don't get too full of yourself when you start having success, and try to stay grounded. And then most importantly, in the world at least of international business, the opportunities to compromise your character and your ethics abound. Lots of gray areas and margins that people can operate in. So a lesson that I would pass on to you is to not do that. Keep your ethics intact, and people will respect you for it. The reason that the factories lent me credit when I needed it is because they trusted me. And ultimately it was do they trust me? And they did. And fortunately, and that came from not doing some of the things that other folks do. And then just stick with it. Okay? And then this is one of my favorite quotes, and if I had to pass this along to you, I would. President Hinckley's great comment that you read up there on the board: "In all of living, have much fun and laughter. Life is to be enjoyed, not just endured." So many people in business are waiting for that big hit to come, that big thing that'll happen tomorrow, and all that money that I'll be able to make then. And you live for tomorrow instead of living for today. And it's a great tragedy, because you find out once you get to that tomorrow that you really missed out. So I've taken, my career path has allowed me to spend a tremendous amount of time with my kids, to go to their games. I coached Little League football for 12 years, had a great time doing that. My kids remember that I was there for them at their activities and such. Could I have done more in business? Could I have made more money had I burrowed down in and spent more time at it? No doubt. But the trade-off to me isn't even comparable. So one advice I'd give you is to enjoy your life. And of course, this great scripture is meaningful to me. And you've all read it before. But if you gain the whole world and lose your own soul, then what have you gained? So succeed, but do it in an ethical, honest way, and you'll be happier. I guarantee you. I know a lot of very rich, unhappy people, and no number of country club memberships and fast cars can make one happy, truly. So that's pretty much it for me. So now the important part for me, and the part I frankly enjoy the most, is the questions and answers that you folks may have. And so it's really, if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that. To the question that you may have, but feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Yeah.
What are your profit margins on stuffed animals like that?
Stuffed animals, well, of course, the cost of everything has gone up. The U.S. dollar, as you know, has been hammered, and the unfortunate part of that equation is that the Chinese currency has gone up just as the U.S. dollar is going down. And it's made it very difficult to do business in China for that reason. And then, of course, with the fuel costs being what they are, the fuel prices are up on the ocean container ships. So we have to margin in a little bit more money to cover it. But for us, we like to hit about a 60% margin on our products, so that covers, that's landed costs. Now keep in mind, some of the retailers out there need to make triple markups to succeed in their business. And sometimes in other markets like Las Vegas, more, you know. So if we sell it to them for $5, you know, they're going to want to sell it for $14.99. You know, so we have to work with that where we have enough margin to give a little bit back to a larger customer. If we start at 60, then we've got a little bit more to give back in working a deal with a larger customer. Does that help you? Okay. And we'll give you a little bit of something there. Okay. All right, another question? Yeah. You and then you in the black. Okay.
You talked about how you only had like 10 employees and you really liked outsourcing.
Right.
What benefits did you see from outsourcing a lot of services?
It made things simpler, frankly, for me, because as an owner of a small company, you're doing a lot more things than you would in a large company, right? So as a result, I tried to keep things as simple as possible, and by outsourcing, I was able to do that. The public warehouse, for example, I paid for the goods that were in the warehouse set fee, and then I also paid set fees for shipping when they handled the boxes. So I could factor that into my cost of sales, and then work my profit margins from that. So it kept things simpler, in the end kept my costs down. And I reached a point where it would have made more economic sense to go to my own warehouse, use my own employees. But I chose not to. And it was fortuitous because then shortly after that, I was approached by Playvisions with an offer to buy. And it was cleaner. I didn't have a lease to worry about and other things to make this.
Were there any like major disadvantages as you were building your business to outsourcing?
I didn't encounter them. With sales representatives, that's kind of a carousel. People come, people go, people don't do well, hire, fire, and that kind of thing. But they were their own independent contractors, so that worked out. So for me, that worked out pretty well. This is a yo-yo. There you go. You were next.
As a non-business major, what do you think made you successful? And if you could go back and learn some things that you didn't know, what would you go back to learn?
Well, as to why I succeeded as a non-business major, I guess I've always had sort of an entrepreneurial bug. I remember selling fish that I'd caught on an outing, a survival outing, to city kids who had never caught fish before at $0.25 a pop. And that was my first real entrepreneur thing, They were hungry, they needed fish, I had fish, we made a margin, we made a deal. But things I didn't know that I wish I had taken more accounting classes. I had to pay a $150 an hour accountant to help me understand how to read a P&L, a profit loss statement, and a financial statement. I had an intuitive sense when I was making money, and I had a good feel for the margins and all that kind of stuff, and I knew how to do all that. But the banks and everybody wanted to have profit loss statements and financial statements that made sense. And I wish I'd have taken more classes and paid better attention on the ones I did. Yeah. Another question? Yeah. One little monkey. Yeah.
You said that very early on in your career when you were selling, you went to the Orient and fell in love with importing.
Yes.
How did you get your introduction to the Orient, and what obstacles did you face, be it language, cultural differences in doing business overseas?
That's a good question. Because I'd been traveling representing other companies that were existing, representing their products to my retail buyers. So I would make appointments in Hong Kong to visit various showrooms with my buyers from my market, and got to know a lot of people and networked a lot in the business. And one of the companies that I represented as a sales representative was a company that sold only to large retailers. So in our business, we call it, they just bought FOB. They Orient. They wouldn't import small quantities for small customers. So I began importing the easiest way, which is I just imported goods from that company with their agreement, and I made them available to small and medium-sized accounts. And that's how I cut my teeth on importing. So it wasn't as risky. But that was a deal where I would import, pre-sell it, It would come in, ship it, I'd invoice it and make the money and sit back and think, oh, that was pretty cool. And so that's the way it began, which was a kind of an easier way, if you will. After a while, you just get to know people and through the course of doing business and networking, and it's important to treat everybody well and fairly, as I've talked about. This business is circular. You know, if you do something that's not ethical or honest to this guy, you know, in 5 years he may be over here and he could be in a position to hurt you, you know. So by trying to play it straight up, it works in your benefit. You get to be known, people know who you are and that you play things fairly. So did I answer that?
Mostly. Did you have to learn other languages to be able
I
to
didn't.
deal with the people?
No, I'm an unrepentant. I speak English, and I don't even do that well. So no, I don't, because you know, we've moved around. You know, we were in South Korea, and then we were working in Indonesia, and then Hong Kong, and now in the interior of China. I would have to learn a lot of different languages. Fortunately, most people are prepared and willing to pander to uneducated Americans, at least linguistically. So here's a weird thing you might like. Yeah, there you go.
How did you decide to switch from your original major into more of a business entrepreneurial thing with toys?
Well, I never did. I mean, I was taking lots of organizational behavior classes, but those were electives in my senior year, you know, junior and senior year. For me, being married and with one child and my wife pregnant with number 2, the exit strategy out of Provo was important, and psychology provided, and I apologize to the psych department, but it was a not so hard way out of school and to get my degree and get gone. And so my love for business and entrepreneurial stuff was just a bonus for me, you know. At that time, you know, it's kind of odd, you know, as I pulled into the valley this morning, you know, and I love this area, and I've been coming back to these lectures for over 10 years, but, you know, BYU holds a great affection in my heart. So, but at the time, I was anxious to leave, so psychology was a good path. Is that honest? That's kind of brutally honest, but that's the way it was for me. Yeah.
What would you call the best business decision that you ever made?
The best business decision would be to start my own company. You know, the importing, the Cascade Toy. I'd started others, but they were the manufacturers reps groups and so on. And for me, in retrospect, looking back, that gave me so much freedom to be able to structure my life and my time and my schedule and church callings and my family around. You know, there were hard dates that I couldn't change, trade shows and things that I needed to be at, but it gave me a great deal of flexibility in my life, which I've always been very, very grateful for. So, does that answer it for you?
Yeah, follow up to that. I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of entrepreneurs talk about how much time, especially as they start up, gets
Yep.
dominated. How much did you have to devote, especially in the early years, to making
It was tough, because at the time I started Cascade Toy, I was also serving as bishop. And so that, and I'd just been on the city council of our local community, and I've always been a little over-involved on things. So it was tough to balance home, family, business. And sometimes I didn't make good choices. I spent too much time in things that didn't matter as much. I think it was, some of you may have read it, but isn't it John Wilcox that he had something talking about coming across the finish line in the wrong race. And I did that a few times, you know, but I learned my lesson, I think. At least I'm hoping I did. Any other questions? Yes.
What gave you the courage to be able to take out those second and third mortgages or loans on your home in that period of financial need?
The question is, why did I do it, or?
What gave you courage to be able to do that? You know, be able to risk that much?
I don't know that it was that much courage. It may have just been, you know, pure stupidity on my side. I don't know. It was just, I didn't really worry about that. I knew it was a risk. I talked to my wife about it, and I said, you know, we're risking a lot right here. We could lose our home and any other asset that we have. And but she fortunately trusted in me, and I trusted in what I thought I knew about the market and and the odds of succeeding. So there wasn't a lot of worry that went into it, I guess I could say. It was just kind of, okay, I'm going to do this, let's go out and make it happen. Okay? And a lot of it is that old perspiration, 80% perspiration and all that stuff. So, any other questions? All right. Well, the good thing about coming back to BYU is that you get to see a lot of fresh faces that have entrepreneurial desires and feelings. And there's a great many things that can be accomplished in this market that exists. For everybody that sees a negative, there's a positive that's possible. I sat around one day as I watched the stock prices of a stock I was holding crash down to, I think, what was it the other day, 5 cents on a stock that had been trading at 70-something a few months before. And a case in point, I sat there and felt sorry for myself. But then it occurred to me, there could be an opportunity here. So I bought as much as I could at 5 cents. And then I sold it the next day at 21. Still not a great price, but a good return. I'm not advocating that kind of trading practice or that kind of risk. But my point is that some people see the cup half empty and other people see the cup half full. Right now, with the problems in China with safety and what's becoming an overregulation in China of the manufacturers that are really having a difficult time. There's a whole other business that's evolving, and that is it's a great time to have a testing lab, a safety testing lab. We all have to test so much more than we've ever had to test before. So that's an entrepreneurial enterprise that a lot of Chinese entrepreneurs are doing very well with. And the testing labs make good money and very little risk involved. So an example, bad times, good opportunities. It just takes somebody with an entrepreneurial idea in their heart and mind, and are willing to take some risks and go out there and do it. So my advice is just keep your eyes open and look around, make good decisions about what you want to do, and then just go after it. But there's always risk. You can't avoid the risk part of it. That's just inherent in entrepreneurial enterprises. I bought a company once. It was a small puppet company. I was doing so well in the plush business. I had I'd reached a point with I did a lot of realistic wildlife, like this little cheetah here, and this is what I still love to make this kind of product. Realistic, just it looks cool, and I still get to do that to some degree. We work with a lot of people in private label projects, and without being specific, there's some theme park that's adding a whole new big attraction later on in 2009, and we're making a whole bunch of realistic stuff for that, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. But there's, you have an opportunity with product like that to stick with something that you love, and then you get into other products where you can innovate and have some fun creating other toys. We did something recently. The owner of our company went down to, I think they're located in Alabama, but a company that makes animal calls, like squirrel and deer and moose and elk and stuff like that. And he came back with a big box full of things. And he had a squirrel call. It had a kind of a cool sound. I thought, we could put that in a stuffed animal, No batteries involved, right? Very simple. Just about anything you do to it makes noise. I don't know about the design. It looks a little bit about my father-in-law, but it was a fun toy. You go out there and you make some stuff with it, and the thing we do is you create the product, you see how it does. If it merits coming back at it again, refining it, improving it, well, then you do that. If not, then you just kind of let it slowly run out of inventory and just don't do it again. But that's how it works. And in this case, we found out, for example, that the head, after we'd already produced it, the head's a little too heavy. And and after a while, he's kind of sleeping the whole time, So, but these are the changes that you make in manufacturing. You reduce the size, change the design a little bit. We've got a little penguin coming out next year that is really cute and makes the noise and stuff like that. So, you know, there's always new things. We're looking at a lot of interesting new products as we come forward. I'll be introducing about 3 dozen new products to start 2009 in my division of the company, and some of them are just really weird, innovative kind of things. Some of them won't succeed, I know that, but my ego's not tied to whether they succeed or not. Just have fun making them and try to make the company some money. And they enjoy having me on board for that reason. Because I own my own company, I think about bottom line type of issues, you know, and they appreciate that side of my experience and stuff like that. Any other questions pop into your head as we're discussing stuff? Yeah.
How have patents been involved? Like, when you patent a toy or a certain, like, that feature with the little sound,
good question.
you know? Like,
very good question. Patents, copyrights. Stuffed animals are tough because you can't really patent a look, per se. That's really kind of it. You can copyright it, but somebody can go out there and change it, you know, tweak it this way or that way. But this, for example, now the Zibbies is a different deal. We applied for a patent on this, and the patent office is flooded. You know, there's so many high-tech patents going in that the waiting on this, it took us almost 2.5 years to get the patent, but it was issued just a few months ago. So we're patented on this. If anybody uses any sort of elastic material on a stuffed animal of any kind, you know, we'll go for them. Or the arms, anything like that. Some of the copies that we see in China have been so rudimentary and so poorly done, we're not worried about it, but we do drop off a copy of our patent and say, you know, if you...
international patent?
Well, we've applied, the U.S. patent issued just recently. We have patents already in Hong Kong and in the EU, and we've applied in Australia, and so in Canada. You got to cover your bases. Pretty much, if you cover the U.S. and you cover the mainland Europe, you're usually pretty good with that, because a factory won't invest the time and effort to produce something that's difficult like this if they can't cash in on the U.S. market. But patents are very important. We also, on this product, we got a trademark that also protects us on the way it looks, just the way it looks. So that's very helpful. So as people knock this off, they're running into some difficulty with us because we've kind of got it every which way covered. Excuse me. This product, as well as we hold about 35 different patents, and this is also patented. It doesn't stop people from making copies, but you just have to nicely give them a copy of your trademark and tell them to cease and desist, or our attorneys will be in touch with you. And that's how it generally works. Sometimes, though, fighting the battle is more costly than you want to do. So in some cases, we just say, tell you what, you pay us a percentage of what you've got in inventory and don't do it again, and go your way, you know. And that approach usually works out pretty well. Yeah. Any questions? Any other questions? I owe you something for that one. That was a good one. How about one of these turtles? Yeah. Are we about out of time? Okay. Well, you guys have had a lot of great questions. Thank you very much. I hope you gathered something that would be useful for you. Good luck.